Well, it's been a fortnight and you guys have given me plenty to talk about. If you haven't seen it, you can find my suggestions in the description. As for your suggestions, we'll be going through them in the order that I saved them to my PC. First off, we have a response by Roaming Adam, who suggests that weekend trains should be all stops and operate at 10-minute frequencies. To a certain degree, I like it. They specifically mention the T4 line, which I'm not a frequent user of, but I've used Oatley Station on weekends, and getting there can be a pain because trains only stop there every 30 minutes. And it's the same at the two stations they mentioned, Banksia and Arncliffe, which really makes it annoying to use. They also mention how most of the faster limited stop services get full. Personally, I agree that more frequency is needed, but I'm not sure making all trains all stops is the solution. It would just slow down trains and arguably lead to a loss of capacity. In my opinion, I think the Illawarra should be quad track as far as Sutherland, and then Cronulla and Waterfall trains could alternate stopping at minor stations like Oatley, Banksia and Arncliffe. Although that proposal requires money, and if it was easy to do, it'd already be done. Maybe I should do a video on my thoughts on the T4, because I strongly believe it needs an upgrade. Next up we have a comment by the random idiot on the internet, who succinctly says, 1. Platform screen doors on the airport link, 2. Public transport orientated development, and 3. More access to shops from stations. Addressing the first point, platform screen doors at the airport stations, I'll address this with Ollie 2074's comment, as they said something similar about platform screen doors. I think for the airport link and certain stations, platform screen doors might be a good option, especially at really busy stations like the City Circle and Airport Link, since that effectively eliminates the risk of people falling onto the tracks. And like Ollie says, allows trains to go through those platforms faster. My main concern would be door placement, as second, third and fourth generation trains all have slightly different door placements, so it would restrict what trains can operate to what stations. But second and third generation trains are all being retired soon, so it's probably fine. Now the next two, public transport orientated development and more access to shops from stations. And it goes without saying, I agree. Personally, I think Sydney does pretty well when it comes to it, but regional cities and towns could do better. But that's a future video. Now we have a comment by Big Dude 101 Oh Yeah, which is a novel name to say the least. They say that my door button suggestion could take inspiration from Transperth, where unlike Melbourne, where you press the button when the train arrives to open the door, you press it while it's moving, and as soon as the guard or driver releases the doors, it opens. I really like that suggestion. People already understand the concept from pedestrian buttons, so it's really only applying to train doors. Great idea in my opinion. And onto the comment by John Bradley 9711, and they say to cut it out with the incessant reminders at railway stations. Which yeah, I agree. We don't need to be reminded every 30 seconds about how we shouldn't smoke, or step over the yellow line, or whatever dumb rubbish that's obvious. I think it's the same as I said with advertisements. Save the PA for important information, because otherwise it becomes auditory noise that we all filter out. I do worry that there is an accessibility issue, as if you replace these warnings with signs, people who can't read, whether that's because of blindness or lack of English proficiency, might not be aware of some policies. But you don't need to play those announcements every 30 seconds, so even just reducing them to every few minutes might be a good option. Next up, we've got a comment from Adama3231, who says that we should slightly increase taxes and make public transport and car rego free, as this will save money on paying transport officers and for ticketing equipment, while making transport more accessible. I'll address the free car rego first, as I strongly disagree. I probably go the opposite direction, as rego acts as a tax on car ownership, so having rego acts to discourage people from owning a car. So I'd probably argue that at least within urban areas, we should increase rego costs, especially for SUVs and American-style utes. Although, I would support abolishing rego for people in regional areas who drive lightweight cars, as they really don't have much of a choice. But for free public transport, I'm very divided. On one hand, yes, it makes it more accessible to people who are poorer. It means we don't need to pay for transport officers or ticket equipment. But at the same time, it only really benefits people who already live near public transport, which are mostly people in inner city areas, who are often wealthy. I think this topic will warrant a full video in the future, but I really don't have an answer, as I'm divided. Alexander Smith 777 mentioned that the first 10 kilometers of the trip should be free, which I feel might be a good middle ground, but then you still need transport officers and ticketing equipment. I think I'll just do a full video on this in future, so my opinion now is, I just don't know. But it's going to be on my to-research list. Our next comments are all about the passenger information displays. First off, we have Clam Train 96, who says that we should replace the current Sydney train's departure displays with the City Metro style ones, as they don't scroll, which can be a pain if you're not familiar with the service. I don't agree with this at all, personally. While the scrolling is a pain, the Metro passenger displays only tell you when a train is coming and where it's going. If you put them on the TA, for example, all express services would just say Campbelltown or Macarthur, which seems fine until you remember that the T8 has lots of weird stop-skipping services. Your Macarthur service might be express to Revesby, then all stops, or express to Holsworthy via Sydenham, then all stops, skipping Macquarie Fields, or express to Riverwood, then Padstow, then express to Holsworthy, and then all stops to Campbelltown. The Metro gets away with it because its services are fairly simple. All trains are all stopped at all time, but doesn't really work for the suburban network with its far more complex service patterns. Next we have a comment by Building Beautifully, another creator that if you haven't checked out, you should. I was in one of his recent videos after all. Anyway, he says that there needs to be a better way to make stopping patterns easier to read. And I very much agree. And funnily enough, Exploring Sydney's Railways responds with what I think is a really great way of doing so. They suggest, instead of referring to services as just T2 or T8, instead give them a letter suffix. So T2A would be limited stop services to Leppington, while T2B would be all stops to Parramatta. I think this is a great idea. They suggest potentially simplifying services alongside this, but I don't think that would be necessary. If we go back to the T8 from before, the T8A could be a limited express to Macarthur, T8B could be all stops to Revesby, and those other weird ones just get extra letters. So T8C for express to Holsworthy, and T8D for that weird Riverwood Padstow Express thing. Sure, you can just wait for it to scroll by, but that's slow. Having a letter means that if you know your service, you can easily just look for a letter and immediately know your train. Or you can just tell someone who's unfamiliar or is in a rush, just get the T8B or T8D if you're going to Riverwood. It also means you know what the following services are in more detail before they appear on the next service board. I think it's something we should really look into implementing. But before I move on, you should go check out Exploring Sydney's Railways channel. They mostly make videos exploring stations around Sydney, like it says on the tin, and what's around them. And they're pretty good. They're only about 30 subs, and I'd love to see them with more. You can find a link to their channel in the description. Now we move on to Richard Jab 11, who has a few. First, on the new train information displays, show the line you're on as well as the colour. No comments, as I think that's a great idea. Even if it doesn't help wayfinding, at least it'll make PIDs slightly more interesting. Second, show the train type on station PIDs, as some people prefer certain trains or may want to avoid trains that are not accessible. I kinda agree. I would worry that some people might see KSET and then avoid it, and then crowd on for the next Millennium or Waratah service. But as for accessibility, I'm not sure it's a concern. The only train that has issues with wheelchair accessibility are the V-sets, but even some of their doors are accessible. But I'm able-bodied, so it's not really for me to say. Otherwise, I think it couldn't hurt to add it. Third, show where the train is on PIDs. I would like it, but as they say, it might make them a bit crammed. Fourth, touchscreen boards where you can look up how to get somewhere from the station, like you find at shopping centres. And I think that's a brilliant idea. No notes from me. Fifth, add USB outlets to trains. I agree. Hopefully the Tangara replacement will have them. Sixth, have quiet carriages on suburban trains. I also agree. Although I'm not sure how effective it'll be, as suburban trains tend to get full of their intercity trains. But at least at off-peak, it should be implemented. Seventh, add luggage racks to suburban trains. I kinda agree and disagree. On one side, they take up space and it might slow down boarding. But on the other hand, they might save space by giving people a place to stash their bags. Really, I don't know. Next we have Trains to New South Wales Vlogs, who says that we should add reversible seating to the D sets. Very much agree, but I worry it'll have to wait for a refurb due to the costs involved. They also say we should install PIDs to the V and T set fleets so they can run aside their replacements for improved capacity. I would normally agree, but I disagree mainly because the V and T sets are very long in the tooth. We've got to remember that the current V set fleet was built between 1977 and 1989, and the Tangara fleet from 1987 to 1996. They're old trains, and unfortunately, by the time you would have them refurbished, some V sets will be pushing 50 years old, and some Tangaras over 40. It's just not viable anymore. Next, they say to also convert some of the metro lines to train lines. I disagree, the tunnels are too small for normal suburban trains, so it's just not doable without a lot of work. And finally, modify some of the Waratahs into a new fleet to make the network less boring. Into a new fleet? I disagree, I'm not even sure how you do that. But modifying some with your novel livery, or copying Melbourne's art trams with Waratahs, I can see that being a good idea. I support that. And up to my next comment, TLD8102 says we should extend a branch of the airport line to Western Sydney Airport. I agree. It'll make both airports be able to work as a sort of double hub. I think it'd be better if it was some sort of metro, or the trains are equipped with luggage space, but either works. It also appears the government is looking into it, so the South West Rail Link might be extended to the new airport, but it's not indicated what line it will be a part of. Next we have Scripper Ryu, who says we should colour code trains. I'm assuming like some metro systems around the world. I agree it would be nice, But like they say, it's not really possible to do for Sydney. They also say to duplicate the Richmond line, which I agree, and they also say to make the Richmond line services express between Blacktown and Parramatta, which I agree, as long as the T5 is more frequent and takes over that job, which they propose a solution for. Have the T1 stop at Granville and allow people to transfer between the T2 and T1 and abolish the Parramatta T2 service. That way, the T5 can be more frequent. Honestly, I agree. I did a video on the T5, which you can find in the description that gives my opinions and some context, but otherwise, I like to skip this idea. And finally, we have Albert 3801, who says the T5 needs to be 8 car trains minimum instead of its common 4 cars. Obviously, I agree, and again, I did a full video arguing that, funnily enough. Albert also says that off-peak services to all stations on the T4 should be every 15 minutes, instead of the existing 30 minutes to stations like Ironcliffe, Banksia, Carlton and Alawa. I agree, although I don't know how doable it would be without making all trains all stops or running a lot more trains. I think in order to do it, without slowing down trains, we need a quad track between Hurstville and Sutherland. To be honest, again, I might do a video on that in future. And well, that's all of them. Thank you to everyone who gave a response. I expected maybe half a dozen responses, and I got back a lot more than that. I might do something in future on other modes or other cities, because this is quite fun. I should have another video out in the coming days, but it's quite political. Otherwise, normal programming will resume in the next fortnight. Anyways, if you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.